Hello and welcome to The Communicative Leader, hosted by me, Dr. Leah O'Million Hodges. My friends call me Dr. O. I'm a professor of communication and a leadership communication expert. On The Communicative Leader, we're working to make your work life what you want it to be. Neal, thank you for joining us today on The Communicative Leader. I'm really excited for our conversation. And I know that you've led creative teams at some of the world's biggest agencies. And I'm wondering, what did the world of high-stakes advertising teach you about what actually moves people to action that a lot of corporate leaders still get wrong?
Yeah, well, there's a bunch, but let's start with this. People make decisions emotionally. Our human beings as a species are irrational sacks of protoplasm with competing impulses. And, when somebody goes, say, to a focus group as a means of finding out what consumers want, I'm sorry to say that focus groups are deeply flawed mechanisms for learning what people really feel, because people don't know what they feel or think. They wouldn't tell you if they did know. And even if they did feel okay about communicating to you, they're terribly inarticulate. So they have difficulty describing it. Human beings don't understand why they do the things they do. They use their rational mind to rationalize the emotional decisions they make. Therefore, I think what most corporate leaders get wrong is they interpret the way that people are going to act based on how they act. But most corporate leaders are deeply rational and systematic and careful people. And as a result, they think everybody's that way. And so they don't understand that if you're going to reach and persuade somebody, you have to do so through their emotions. You have to do so by making them feel psychologically safe. And that listing a series of features and benefits is completely ineffective at creating a connection with people that will make them have a kind of irrational loyalty to a product or a service or to a person.
Yeah, that makes me think, that idea of when you have the CEO and they tend to have some kind of shared, very rational qualities, but they're not speaking just to other CEOs. It makes me think when I first started in academia, my first chair was like, Leah, you're not teaching, a classroom of Leahs. And I'm like, you're right. And it helped make things make a lot more sense then.
I think we have to have a lot of empathy for the people that we're trying to persuade. That we're all on this human journey together. And the place that we get in trouble is thinking that it's a competition, that we're all, that with limited resources. What's the phrase they used to use in the 80s? The one with the most toys at the end wins. No, that is a pathway to disaster and dissatisfaction. The more that you realize that you're in this game with other people, the more that you can help others thrive, the more satisfied and more victorious you'll be over the long term. Just old-fashioned Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People, I think in about 1933. And very little has changed. You could read that book now, and there are a few things that seem out of date, but the principles aren't.
Yeah, exactly. I love the saying of yours, leadership is built, not declared. And it made me think of the old saying where their leaders are born, not made. So I love your take on this. Leadership is built, not declared. So I'm wondering, Neal, from a communication standpoint, what are these small everyday signals that a leader can use when they're communicating that help to build a foundation of trust and authority before they even step on a stage?
Well, I think they have to recognize that human beings are the engine of creativity and productivity. And once you have recognized that we're dealing with human beings, you'll start to realize that they need to feel as though you care about them in order to feel psychologically safe. I'll give you an example from the animal kingdom. Chimpanzee troops are usually led by a physically dominant male. And because they can kick anybody's ass, everybody sort of backs off and says, okay, you get to lead this troop. But chimpanzees have a very finely tuned radar for fairness. And if they sense that the leader is inadequately concerned for the welfare of the sick or unprotective of those that are less privileged by muscles, or they feel as though they're only doling out favors to their friends, the other chimpanzees will get together and they will rip him limb from limb. And I mean that quite literally. They will dismember him. First, they'll chew off his face. And the great successful chimpanzee leaders are the ones that are fair and are concerned about the welfare of the disadvantaged and the ones who can't take care of themselves. The chimpanzee leaders that survive are the ones that take care of the old. And that way everybody goes, if I stick with this character, then we will all be protected. But as soon as they get the sense that if we stick with this leader, almost none of us are safe, they'll kill you. Now, in human beings, they don't necessarily have to kill you to do you a lot of damage. There are lots of little things that people can do, sometimes passive, sometimes active, to screw with you. And I think what's really important is that for a leader to go, if I'm going to thrive and survive and have a long career, I need to start caring about people, and I need to start communicating to them about why I care about them and see them as individuals. Despite the evidence that psychopaths succeed in business, you'll notice the way they'll move very rapidly from place to place. Yeah, it's because the trail of devastation they're leaving inside a company means that they are an inch away from getting their face chewed off, figuratively.
Yeah. That's what I always say. Like, the successes are likely to be very short-lived if you take that approach. And consequences long to the reputation.
I think our incentives right now are misaligned with the long-term health of business. Say, for example, in education, the Finns and the Danes have figured it out that the kids need a lot more recess, and they need a lot more. They need to be able to interact on their own without so much guidance, because when you allow children to play with each other, they actually develop bigger brains. They become pro-social. They learn how to interact with one another. They're more creative because they're playing games with each other and they're inventing their own, so forth. But on a very short-term basis, it's difficult to show that a child's brain is actually getting bigger. Where are the test results? If I can jam these kids against their will and against everything we know about the species, if I can cram them into a classroom and beat them with information, then I'll be able to demonstrate that there is a metric against what they have learned to do this or that. Our short-term profile almost guarantees failure, because when you look over a 12-year lifespan or a 15-year span, then you can start to see that these kids are more creative, better teammates, and that the society itself is more even-handed and has a shared destiny.
Because I think about too, you learn how to negotiate, you learn how to listen, and you learn the consequences if you don't do those things very well. Right?
That's right.
So let's shift a little bit and think about messaging now. And I know, Neal, you've spent years helping brands like Heineken and Sony craft messages that stick. And so if we have a leader who's trying to communicate a new change, maybe it's not a popular opinion, how can they use a narrative arc instead of kind of that traditional bulleted list in an email to get emotional buy-in?
You have to start with actually having a reason that will gain traction among your people. You can't foist onto other people your own rationale for things. For example, let's take return to office as an example. When COVID forced everybody out to be doing remote work, this was jammed onto them. And then they discovered, you know what, there are certain benefits to this. And now that everybody is saying we've got to come back into the office, people are quite reluctant to give up the things that turned out to be good. Short commute times. They didn't have to pay for gas anymore. They didn't, they had a lot of flexibility when it came to taking care of somebody else in the family or doing chores and so on. You get the idea. There were a lot of perks to that. When you're demanding that people come back into the office, the first thing you have to ask yourself is, why would this benefit them? And everything has to be built around that. Not come back in or else. And you'll notice that a lot of companies will use this demand for people to come back in the office so that it's a soft layoff. They don't have to pay people severance because they're driving them out with this insistence without explanation. Their meanness is part of the plan in order to discourage you from continuing to work here. But there are organizations that really do have reasons why it would be return to office is a good idea. And I'll give you an example. I met this guy who was working for Major League Baseball, and he was an older guy, maybe in his late 50s. And he said, he said this to his own people and his own organization. I'm not demanding that you come back into the office, but can I just tell you what it was like when I was a young person? When I was coming up, I found that I had mentors here that gave me the benefit all of their years of experience. I didn't have to live through it in order to learn and understand what they knew. And as a result, I progressed a lot faster. And what's more, when you have somebody that's looking out for you, you hear a lot of things that you wouldn't have otherwise heard. You get early warning on a lot of things, and you build strong relationships. And I'll give you an example of how, I got a mentor. I learned all of what he knew. And then there was a point where he said to me, we're going to have to start sort of shedding bodies at this company because of a bad couple of quarters. And I think you ought to be doing this and this and this to protect yourself from a layoff.
Yeah.
Well, you're never going to hear that early warning signal if you're not in the building relationships with people. So do what you want, but understand that when you're a guy my age, I want to help you. It's just a compulsion that you have.
Yeah.
So when a leader is telling a story like that, all of a sudden, somebody who's considering the trade-offs of going in or not going in, at least they're doing it with their eyes open. At least they're going, when it comes to layoff time and every company has a season, don't you want to have a relationship in the building where somebody's actually actively trying to look out for you? You get the idea where you have to start with what's the benefit to somebody, not what are the consequences.
Yeah. Yeah. And you had just mentioned meanness, and that is a great segue to my next question, because I know a lot of executives still shy away from terms like kindness or empathy because they don't feel like they can quantify it, right? So how do you help these really results-oriented leaders see that kindness is actually a tool for team cohesion, for faster decision-making, right? All of those positives.
Well, there is a return on investment to kindness that they are being short-sighted about. I've seen it again and again in highly competitive situations. The example I will often use, because it was just brilliant, is there was a car dealer that I knew, and he was one of the best I ever saw. And he had a kind of unofficial approach, which was, I'll lose a little money to make a friend. So in other words, when you went to buy a car, if you're buying a new car or a used car for that matter, the process is a slog. It is the Bataan Death March. Is the least friendly, most awful. You are certain you're being cheated. And you can just tell that the salesperson is going to grind you until you submit. That's most car dealers. This person used to have an instruction to his people. I want them in and out of here inside of 3 hours. And if you can't get it done, I'm going to show up and get it done for you. And that's not good for you.
Yeah.
I need you to have them in it. And if you have to lose $500, that's okay. Because I will have another unit in operation for which I am performing service. And if you're sweet to them and you're friendly to them, they'll come to you for service. They'll buy their next car from you. So it looks like we're losing money. In fact, over time, we're going to gain a lot of money. And he would do the sweetest things for people. He would, for example, on the New Jersey Turnpike, everybody had a crack in their windshield because the trucks were all, come spring, they're throwing up all of the winter accumulated stuff. He would go out into the parking lot, and it didn't matter if you were a customer or not a customer. He would send somebody out there to fix your windshield for you. If the crack was small, he could just fix it, and he wouldn't tell anybody. He wouldn't announce they were doing it. He certainly wouldn't charge them. And it developed this kind of urban myth that if you just pull into his parking lot, you'll get your windshield fixed. And so here's what would happen. So half the people would go, think they fixed it. Now it becomes a topic of conversation. But then another person would say, yeah, I know all about that. Every spring I go down there and this sucker will fix my windshield. And you know what? It's fantastic to spread the word that this car dealer is a sucker.
Yeah.
You know why? Because if people think that you're a sucker for fixing the windshield, they also think they're going to take you on the car deal.
Yeah.
That's a great thing.
That's brilliant.
Right?
Yep.
So this $5 thing turns into a magnificent marketing ploy. And that that was just the beginning. He was very sweet. He was very sweet with older customers. And he would sometimes tell his service managers, listen, I want you to do me a favor. If Mrs. Hotchengertis comes in and it's less than $200, just give it to her. But don't tell her it's from me, and don't tell her it's the policy. Tell her it's from you. Tell her it's a gift from you. Because I want her to feel like that nice Rick down at this dealership. You need to go to him, sweetie, for your next car. Because he's the nicest young man, and I promise you, he'll have you out of there in 2 hours. You see how the return on investment is so disproportionately in his favor just because of this attitude. But I'll give you other examples. Restaurants that offer you a free dessert if you're a brand new customer. Or it seems like they're taking a loss. No, they're making an investment. They're making an investment. And in regular average day to day, if you're always just looking for little things that you can do for people, the little things to signal that you care about them. Little things are, there's a phrase, how you do anything is how you do everything. And when you give small tokens towards recognizing that there's a human being inside the walls, they'll rationalize their desire to do an extra good job at work.
Yeah.
It's really hard to, it's not difficult to cheat somebody who you always sense is chiseling you. Like if you're working in an office and you get the sense that they're chiseling you on your overtime, I guarantee you those people are walking out of the building with property of the building. Like they'll find a way to screw you right back.
Yep. Yeah. To get that compensation they feel and they probably did earn, right?
Yeah, well, but I'm just saying that the return on investment of kindness is much higher than you think it is. And imagine going to any kind of service business and you behave badly as a customer. There are 1,000 ways they can get their revenge on you. And then let's look at the opposite. You go into an airport or a restaurant or a hotel and you're very nice to the front desk people. They have a lot of discretion about things like upgrades and little bonuses. So the sweeter you are, the nicer you are, the more likely you are to trigger one of these bonuses.
Yes. And so let's continue with this with everyday kindness. So I know, Neal, your videos on everyday kindness have gone viral globally. And I'm wondering what that experience has taught you about the hunger employees have to feel more humanized, a more humanized form of leadership communication in 2026.
Yeah, there is the human species only survived because we were good at being teammates, because in fact, there is some evidence that Neanderthals they had bigger brains than we did, and that they were actually smarter than we were. They were bigger, they were better at figuring out tools and learning how to hunt and so on. Well, okay, well, if they're smarter than we were, how did we survive? Because we cooperated better. Neanderthals were lone wolves. They didn't cluster in the big groups that Homo sapiens grouped in. It was our numbers that saved us. And as a result, anybody who's good at facilitating group cohesion, they tend to succeed. Great football coaches create an atmosphere of team building. They foster unselfish players. And you'll see this again and again. Great teams, no one person can win you a championship. Otherwise, some of these fantastic solopreneur kind of people, they would be doing even better. Now, it's not to say that you can't on your own achieve great things. But what I'm suggesting is you can achieve much more if you are good at creating a culture of group cohesion. Well, kindness is the way to do that, and showing and care and a concern for the welfare of other people. And you'll see this again and again on the street. But let me give you an example in business of how creating group cohesion actually can increase the IQ of the people in your team. A typical brainstorm, somebody important will sit up in front of the table and then they will announce there are no bad ideas and we need a new way to generate more sales of our waffle, and act like your job depends on it. Just let's go, start throwing out ideas. Yep. Now, they think this is, that they've said there are no bad ideas. So you've inoculated the group from criticism. Okay. What you've really done is you have created an environment which was supposed to be creative, and you have turned it into a competition, because now people act as though your job depends on it. Means I now have to start spouting ideas, and I have to be very careful of what is my boss, who is also at this table, going to think? Where do I fit in this pecking order? What if Ron, who's always a wet blanket, starts to trash my idea? Well, 15% of your brain is not thinking about the assignment. It's thinking about the Hunger Games that we're now engaged in. It is fight or flight now. You're not thinking clearly, and you're not thinking of the part of your brain that does all your creative thinking. That's not activated. What's activated now is your anger, your frustration, and your fear. So you just lost 15 IQ points on an average person. Now, let's look at the alternative. The person in charge of the table says, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a single question, just one. That's all we're going to deal with today. And what I want you to do is, after I ask you, I want you to spend 5 minutes. We're all going to be absolutely silent. I want you to write down everything you can think of that will help us get there. I'll give you an example of a question. What would it take to get you to order a Pizza Hut pizza tonight? You specifically. I don't mean people. I mean, you. What would it take to get you to order a Pizza Hut pizza tonight? That's the only question you're going to answer. Everybody's going to write down their ideas for 5 minutes. Then we're going to go around the table arbitrarily in this order, and you're going to start telling us what's on your list. Now, I accept that the last person called on is probably going to have all the same ideas that we've already heard. That's okay. That's okay, because that's not where the real traction is. The traction is in, what do you think of other people's ideas? Can you think of a way to make them better? Can you think of a way to plus them out? Now, this is where diversity really helps, because when I was on that very brainstorming table, I was 45 years old and a father of 2 young children. By contrast, we had a young gal here who was Dominican, who was single and hot for to try. You know, she was a brand new creative. And so we're not going to see the world the same way. Yeah. I wouldn't dream of eating carbs at that age for fear of getting fat, right? So all of a sudden, my concerns and her concerns are very different. But she hears me say, all I want to do is be a hero to my children. I don't give a crap about the pizza. But if they like it, if there's something about it that they want, and I look like a hero walking the door, then I'll buy it every night. And so she says, oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, my father used to come home with this, that were little games we could play. All of a sudden, we've got a brand new idea. Not because I thought of it, but because my thought triggered her thought. Okay, so all of a sudden now, we're teammates now. Yeah. We're not in competition with each other. We're working on the idea together. And I appreciate that her perspective is not mine. And I go, thank God we're not the same people. Now we've got brand new ideas. Yeah. Now, here's what then happens. At the end of the process, instead of competing, everybody owns a little bit of everybody else's idea. And that means nobody's precious about which ones got picked. Instead, we feel like we contributed. You see how different the attitude and the mindset is at the table? You see how much more productive that is? What's the mood as we all leave that room? We're excited. We're energized. The room has been oxygenated by the fact that we all realized it was each other's contributions to our ideas that made them better, things I wouldn't have thought of. And the leader of the group has very deliberately created an environment where don't worry if you're the last one to say something. Sometimes hearing that 5 people all had that idea is a very good thing. It's a sign that maybe we either should adopt it because it's so common, or we should avoid it because it's too common. You get the idea. And that to me, having led creative teams, is there's a lesson in there for every leader, which is you need to create an environment of psychological safety where people feel like by exposing their ideas, they're not expecting it to be the revealed word of God. They're simply wondering whether anybody else has an opinion about this. And then when they do have opinions, instead of going, no, don't change my idea, they go, ooh, that's good. Yeah. That makes it better. Exactly. And then we all walk out. I mean, well, this is the thing about human beings. We win when we cooperate. And when you set up an environment where Homo sapiens wants to cooperate. Yeah. It wants to feel safe, surrounded by allies. It doesn't need you as a leader to come in there and create division and rage baiting and making people feel as though if they don't succeed, they're out. You know, that old Jack Welch thing of like, what do they call it? Rank and yank? Yeah. Yeah. It's good for 3 people, the top 3. That's good for the top 3 people who have the most stock. Everybody else can go themselves.
And I love so much of what you were sharing there, Neal. I was thinking too you talked about psychological safety, and I think even having the leader really clearly kind of outlining the rules of engagement. This is what happens first. This is the expectation. We're going to go around this way. We might have repetition. It's, those are the things that drain bandwidth when people are, especially if someone is anxious or new or not clear. And that helps to answer those questions preemptively. So then we're present.
Nice. That I hadn't thought of that, but that's right. That's all the more bandwidth and brain power that you are now by being unclear, or it's amorphous, but I'm not any good at this. That all of those things are draining you of your capacity. There's one extra factor, which is when a leader is quite clear about what they're doing. In this case, it was, I'm going to ask you one question. Okay. We're all focused on one issue. That is really great because the leader has said, once we get this handled, we'll worry about other things. But in the meantime, we're going to completely focus on this one thing. And for people with ADHD, that is an enormously liberating thing to say, I'm not going to distract you. We're all in this together. Leaders that can isolate and make simple otherwise what is complicated or overcharged, that's a great leader. And they will, have you ever heard that phrase? They say, well, it's people overestimate what they can get done in a day, but they underestimate what they can get done in a year. A leader who isolates singular issues and lets you spend enough time on that one issue is the one who goes, I'm not going to overestimate what we're going to do right now. And by getting done that one thing, it creates a relief among everybody. They go, ooh, okay, ready for the next issue. And then over the course of the year, they've created their best work.
Yeah.
Companies like them, their stock and trade is new ideas, who actually have in their corporate charter that there needs to be a certain proportion of their income has to come from ideas that are less than 18 months old. They've like enforced that.
Yeah.
They learn very quickly what does and doesn't produce new ideas. And it is my understanding that people are really happy working at 3M, that they like the environment.
Yeah.
Because the management has gone, I don't frankly care what will produce the best ideas. I just want to know what does. It turns out being nice to people, acting, creating good teammates, it's very productive. And then one last thing I just want to go on the editorial on the record for, which is I do think that people underestimate the ageism has created an environment where because a 27-year-old's mind is so fast and so adept, they think that somebody over the age of 50 is of no value anymore. It's like, well, no. I mean, if you understood how useful they are, say, on a jury or in a brainstorming, they're not necessarily going to come up with new ideas, but what they will be able to do is bring to bear their historical understanding of context. And as long as an over 50 is not negative, as long as they're supportive and they respect young people's opinions, their contribution can be disproportionate. Because, what if I told you that I could give you the benefit of 35 years of experience in a category and you're only 27 years old? Would you take that bargain?
Yeah.
Of course you would.
Yeah.
Well, then why are you getting rid of all the people that can give them that education? Hey, guess what? You don't have to piss on the electric fence to find out that it's going to shock you. This person will tell you ahead of time.
Yeah. So let's kind of continue this idea of, I think part of this is still integrating the everyday kindness, but you think about marketing as promise keeping. And I love that. That's not a take that I've heard, and it rings so true. And so I'm wondering, in a leadership context, how does a breakdown of small promises, maybe it's, forgetting a follow-up email or showing up late to meetings, how does that corrode the brand or perception of that particular leader?
Well, think about the brands that are sort of, I'll give an example from Toyota because I had such long experience from Toyota. Toyota had a recall of the Toyota Camry, which was their flagship car. That was their biggest selling car in 2008 or 9. And I was right up front in the front row for that whole recall. Our team was actually the first ones to put an ad out into the public about that recall. And so I had a front row seat at the way that Toyota behaved in that. Now, the recall was based on the idea that the cars were unintendedly accelerating. So you had a lot of these anecdotal cases of people that crashed their cars into walls or through garage doors because the car didn't stop when they took their foot off the gas. Well, they discovered that 99% of cases, it was driver error. They were putting their foot on the brake. They were putting their foot on the gas when they thought they were putting their foot on the brake. And so in their minds, they really did have their foot on the brake and it went crash to the wall. No, they didn't. They put their foot on the accelerator. In the very few percentage of cases when it really was unintended acceleration, what happened was they had, in the East Coast winters, they had put too many floor mats on top of each other. And the accelerator got trapped under the floor mats. And it really did unintentionally accelerate. But here was the thing. People don't know that it was driver error. And they're never going to accept it. And a company that blames the driver is never going to be believed out there in the world. Toyota understood this is not our fault, but there is unfortunately only one response that we can do as a company that cares about its customers, which is true or not, we're going to treat it as true. And we're going to recall these things, and we are going to treat customers during the recall, we're going to treat them super well. We're not going to charge them for these things. We're not going to try and put them in a new car. We're not going to use this as a way to try to scalp people or chisel them or give them a lot of extra service. No, what we're going to do is we're going to treat them 100% like this is our fault. This is a mea culpa. We're very sorry. We'll make this as painless as we can. And there was this perverse extra benefit, which was that happened to have been just concurrent with the subprime mortgage meltdown. So car dealers were really struggling because nobody was buying new cars. Ironically enough, all of that service work that Toyota factory was paying for was keeping all the dealers afloat because their biggest car, people were coming in to get fixed and they were just coining it on the service. Well, Toyota, because of that, as you can imagine, the dealers survived and they were ecstatic to have been Toyota dealers. Because nobody was chiseling anybody. Toyota was good for the money. Because they treated their customers so well, because they accepted blame for something that really wasn't their fault. And because people eventually found out, you do realize Toyota wasn't the one problem, but they treated it like they were. On the off chance they were wrong, then what happened was all of the satisfaction rates for the Camry customers were vastly higher after the recall than before the recall. So, So everybody still trusted the brand. The brand metrics were great. Everybody believed in them as a company. The Camry buyers specifically came back in droves for the next Camry. The dealers survived and felt that their relationship with the factory was stronger than ever. Or they could have been douchebags about it. And then it would have been a path to disaster. So that's a really good real world example of they trusted their customers enough to say, you know what, maybe we're wrong. I don't think so, but maybe. And if we are, there's only one way to behave. And to me, that was a really good example. I mean, private equity is not going to behave like that.
And so one thing we've touched on earlier in our chat is this idea of storytelling. And I know that how important it is. I love the research connected with it, but I also know that not everyone feels like a natural storyteller. So I'm wondering, Neal, in your experience, what is a simple way for a manager to start collecting these kind of micro stories from their daily life to use in staff meetings or, in other touch points so that they can form these trusting relationships?
Well, I'll give you a general principle, and then I'll give you a very specific example. So a general principle is that when you would be surprised at how many times during the day, there's something that happens to you that's worth talking about. So I keep a notebook of all these moments that happen to me during a day, of little things that could potentially be stories. And they're not always a story, but it's sort of surprising about, I was listening to a guy who was telling me about how he got into flooring as a business. And he was saying that, that not a lot of people think of flooring as a sexy business, but he had worked for his father who came back from Nam and the description of his relationship with his father turned out to be a very brilliant tale about how a son looks up to their dad and then what their father teaches them. That's worth a story. It's about flooring, but it's not really about flooring. And you need to, when you experience these little things, if you write them down, they'll provoke memories later in the day that it's worth telling a tale. Now, in an exact small example is that if you look for moments when people were nice to you, when they didn't have to be, if you go out into the world looking for examples of people treating you well, and you use that as the kind of story you tell, an uplifting tale, that reinforces people's belief that, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe people aren't all out to get you. Maybe we're not all, the world isn't filled with idiots. Every time you reinforce these notions with your own people, it gives them a sense of hope and positivity. And when you tell stories that uplift, it turns out to have a kind of an attractive power. You draw positive people to you. And it signals to the group that positivity is our vibe here. And they stop saying snarky things and they stop saying nasty things about each other. And every time you have the opportunity to tell a story like that, in a business context. It signals this is how we are as a group.
Yep.
So if you fit in here, then you're like that. And if you don't have anything positive to say, if your contribution is always negative, maybe you should be looking for another place to thrive, because this is not how we do things. When you consider the dividend for an average person at a company, when you are making good presentations or you tell uplifting stories, I have watched the trajectory of executives. They find themselves very close to the C-suite when they're good in front of a crowd. But you don't instantly come out of the womb good in front of a room. Most people are very self-conscious. They have difficulty in, they get stage fright for very good reasons, because that is the natural default setting that nature has prepared us for. At no time in nature was it ever a good thing to have 50 sets of eyes all focused on you when you're standing alone, unarmed, with a spotlight on you and everybody hanging on every word. Of course, this provokes terror in you because you're normal, because that's how the species survived, was we're more comfortable in groups. That psychological safety is when we're surrounded by allies. However, you can train yourself to be better in front of a group, in front of a room, by getting your reps in, by practicing. And when you have a phone, you can practice without the fear of judgment because you're the only one watching it. But you know what happens, of course, is that everybody cringes when they see themselves on camera.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. I get it.
But if you can get over it, if you can do enough reps, then it's like the Beatles' 10,000 hours in, practicing. They weren't great at first. They got great. And the dividend of being able to surprise people in front of a room with how good you are is so disproportionate to the effort that it really does behoove everyone to say, you know what, maybe you don't have to be the greatest in the world. You just have to be better than you were last week.
Exactly.
And I saw a young woman in our own organization who was terrified of getting up on stage, but that because of circumstances, it was her or nobody.
Okay.
And so we coached her up and really practiced and really leaned on that first minute, got her, really tuned so that she knew, come hell or high water, here's what I know. At least I've got the first minute. I know it's going to be great. And what happens is when you get up and you mesmerize people for 60 seconds, they're going to give you credit for that the whole way through. Even when you start stepping on yourself at the end, they still remember the person that came out there and was unafraid. And what happened was this. She was so good and she was so seemingly comfortable on stage. Who do you think she was up there on that stage with? Like, who else was on that agenda? All the big shots. So she was hanging out with all the big shots and she walked out there and they all went, wow, she's really good. And the next time a speaking opportunity came up, they go, whatever happened to that gal? She was really good in Miami. You should get her to this thing. And all of a sudden, they're asking for you. You see the dividend of go out there, practiced, rehearsed, and ready to take your swings. It's like somebody just gave you a major league at bat. What are you going to do with it? You get you hit a triple, they're going to put you up again.
Exactly. That's what I tell students. Communication, it's a muscle, right? The more we practice, the stronger that muscle gets.
That's right. That's 100% right.
Exactly.
And of course, the trick to getting big muscles is consistency, like just day after day in the gym. And by the way, when you start to see results, like when people actually comment, wow, that was really good, Dana. That was really good. Well, it's like finding out that you go to the gym and you go, oh my God, I've got a trap.
It's working.
You're like, I've got a muscle there. And then you get addicted because you're like, ooh, let me see if I can't make that.
Exactly. So let's continue with this kind of storytelling. Neal, if you have a leader who realizes their culture has become transactional or cold or snarky, just a little bit off, you've talked about these stories of kindness. I'm wondering how can a leader start that story? How do they bring in that conversation tomorrow to start humanizing the workplace again?
Well, I'll give you certain rules that I bang away at all the time. Now, here's the first one. Life gets so much easier when people like you, and therefore never make yourself the hero of your own stories. They will not like you. You think that by telling everybody how wonderful you are, that they're going to think you're wonderful? Brother, you've just put that you've self-owned. It's an own goal. Like you scored against yourself. When you make yourself the hero of your own stories, you are not credible, because there's this great quote from George Orwell where he says, any autobiography that does not reveal something disgraceful is not to be believed, because anyone who is the hero of their own story is telling the truth.
Yeah.
And even if they were, they will not get credit for it. That unless you reveal something disgraceful, you're not to be believed. Therefore, anytime a leader wants to set a tone, they must not make themselves the hero, but they should rather celebrate something that has inspired them, like who'd inspired them, particularly if it was an underling at the company. Can I just call everybody's attention for a minute to Leah? Leah did something I'm not even sure she knew she was being observed. But on behalf of a customer, she went out of her way to correct an error that they did not know they'd made. And I only found out about it because later I got a call from that customer. Leah, did you know that? You didn't know that? Yeah. Well, they called me later. And in this way, the reason I'm calling her out, the reason I'm calling everybody's attention to it is that gesture, that single gesture probably saved us from losing that client. And Leah, you'll be getting a little bonus for that. A leader that does that, everybody is going to be sweating and straining to earn that kind of praise. Instead of the leader saying, I got a call today from a client who was very happy with our service, and one of our people had really gone out of their way. And I'm proud to have set the kind of environment where that kind of behavior. People think, you see how absurd that sounds. I've seen that.
Oh, it's so common, right? Yeah, that's why I'm laughing. I'm like, wow, heard that before.
And that the humble brag on LinkedIn, I'm so humbled to have won this award. That's why I'm going on the world tour telling everyone.
Yes.
Because I'm so humbled. Look, so the first two rules, life gets easier when people like you, because when they like you, they warn you about trouble. They tell you about things that are good news. You hear bad news right away when people like you. The second thing is, don't make yourself the hero of your own stories, because you want to be liked. You want to be trusted. You want to feel like people feel like if they tell you good news, you're not going to steal it and go and make it pretend everybody that it's your own. An environment in which you're telling stories that celebrate other people. And let's think again about uplifting stories. Uplifting stories generally are about things that you think will benefit the audience. So I saw a really good example of Jose Mourinho, who is the coach, or who was the coach at the time, of Tottenham Hotspurs in the UK Premier League. So he's renowned as an excellent coach. He's one of sort of those 5 coaches that they create miracles wherever they go.
Yeah.
And Tottenham was playing Olympiacos in one of these things. And a ball boy noticed that the Tottenham player was ready for the ball, and the Olympiacos player was napping for just a half second. So this ball boy rushes the throw into this guy, and they beat this guy by a half step. That's all it took. Just a half step, a half second soon. And it set up this easy peasy goal. Because the ball boy was paying attention. Jose Mourinho had been a ball boy when he was very young. And he goes over to this guy in the middle of the game. He goes over to this kid and he gives him a big hug and he congratulates him. And then later on, he mentions him in the press conference after the game. He says, that is a very good ball boy. He was not concerned. He was not thinking about the scarves in the stands or thinking about this. No, he was in the game. He was playing the game. And so what happens is when Jose Mourinho calls attention to this thing, he tells the story of this kid, sends a signal to the entire organization. You think you're not seen? You think we don't notice? Everybody get on board. And we will win in 1,000 little ways that will add up to extra goals. You don't know. It could be the difference for the entire season. That one goal could be the difference in winning that one game that puts you at the top of the stands. Well, guess what? Every company's like that. The cleaning staff can save you, or they can deliberately not save you. The stories have to be based on, you have to ask yourself, what is the environment I want to create here? And all of your stories have to serve that master. I want to create an environment, even highly competitive environments. It has to be, they still have to trust the leadership. Because a great salesman is fungible. Just because I am brilliant at selling computer software doesn't mean I won't be brilliant at selling aircraft carriers. Sales is sales, baby. So if you don't treat if you're not straight with your salespeople, if you chisel your salespeople, they will leave. Nobody's got an easier job of finding a job than a great salesperson.
Yep. Exactly. So Neal, I have 2 final questions for you, and I'm bummed we're coming to the end of our time together because this has been so enjoyable.
Thank you. This has been fun.
good. The way we end all episodes of The Communicative Leaders, these two questions go hand in hand. So the first part is, what is the advice, the tip, or challenge you want to leave our titled leaders with? And then the second part, what's the advice, tip, challenge for employees of all ranks?
So let's start with the leaders. You need to start noticing when people do good things. You have to celebrate what you want more of. And stories are a fantastic way of doing that, because again and again, what you'll see is that when you celebrate people, it's emotionally invests them in your leadership. They feel bonded to you. They'll go, it's so disproportionate. A little goes a long way. And never make false praise. Only praise honest, real praise, because you want the praise to be meaningful. And if everybody gets a participation trophy, nobody cares when you call them out. So it's got to be real. That's the first thing. I want to tack on an addendum to that, which is even if you were a complete psychopath and all you ever cared about was yourself, you were completely and only motivated by what's in it for you, you would still do what I'm talking about, because the return is so disproportionate to the effort. So start noticing. Go out of your way to walk around and find out when people are setting the right example. And it's particularly important that you get that you spread the credit in such a way where it's not just your direct reports. Like, you need to have an intelligence network feeding you when people are doing good things. A really good executive assistant is a great listener. They hear things you don't hear. And they always talk to their bosses about, did you notice that this woman did this and this and this, and that jackass took credit for it? Just so you know. Okay, so you got to start noticing. Now, for the middle people and so forth, do the same thing for anybody that works for you. Cultivate an environment of trust and openness. Cultivate a spirit of teamwork among your team so that you reduce friction, you reduce conflict. Unfortunately, you got to get rid of bad actors. You got to get rid of people that are selfish, self-interested, jealous, who steal other people's ideas. They have to go because they're detrimental to the progress of the entire team. You'll see this again and again in sports teams where some star is toxic. And even though clearly they're talented, you'll see that sometimes championship teams have actually gotten rid of their best player and all of a sudden they start winning. So a middle person has to set the example for the junior people, and they have to set an example that will be noticed by the top person. They have to be the kind of performer where they are generous and they give credit and they share credit and they create an environment of psychological safety. And the way to do that is by teeing up meetings so that everybody's on the same page and clear. And in their communication, they don't shift blame or try to be passive aggressive about things. They're straightforward and honest. They invite in private, they invite criticism. They don't dress people down in public. They offer constructive ways to succeed in private. And by setting a tone where you actively, people know you're looking out for them, then they welcome your criticism. Instead of, try to shunt off your criticism. I've had bosses that were so good and who I knew had my best interests at heart. So when they critiqued me, I accepted it in the spirit in which it was meant, which is, look, I want you to succeed. So you got to stop saying this. Makes yourself remember. They know more than you'll ever know about this topic. Don't walk into that room acting like you know what's going on. Okay. I mean, a little more humility would go a long way. Okay, boss. Jesus. How bad is the damage? It's not bad, but I'm just trying to make sure you don't really burn yourself.
Let's contain it.
Right. Yeah. So a middle person, a junior person especially, needs to be actively seeking critique. And what's more, when you're a junior person, you need to be able to start increasing your skill set. You need to start learning new things. And some things are timeless. Some things, even in the age of AI, are all the more important. For example, being human in the age of AI is more important than it used to be. Learning to communicate sincerely with others, authentically, not posing, not trying to be a big shot, not making perverse claims about how wonderful you are. People catch on to that kind of manipulation pretty quickly. You want to be a good friend. You want to hear, like I say, you want to hear bad news right away. And that's an old Godfather thing. Mr. Corleone insists on hearing bad news right now, because good news can wait.
Yes. Yep.
So for junior people, a really nice way to increase your network is by being good to people. And I'll throw one last sort of tip out for thank you notes in the mail, not email thank yous. I mean, put a stamp on it, write a handwritten letter. Oh my God, those go a long way.
Yeah. I actually was told one of my first professional roles, I had less experience, but I wrote the thank you note. I put it in the mail, and that's what got me the job in marketing, because I thought this is what you'll do with our clients.
Yeah, because and they're not wrong, are they? They're not at all wrong. They know that how you do anything is how you do everything. You're the kind of person who had the foresight to go, details matter. Small gestures will add up over time. A personal touch. Let's face it, even in the age of AI, we are in a relationship business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, Neal, this has been so much fun. I have so many notes I'm going to return to. Thank you for sharing your time, for all of these insights. So it's really helpful for me. I know it's going to be really helpful for our listeners as well.
Thank you, Leah, and doctor, I should say. And what's more, for the benefit of your audience, the doctor here has been so gracious with me and the number of false starts that I've made. I actually interrupted her previous podcast. I just appeared on the screen. Sorry, got it wrong again. So she's been very gracious and hasn't once been snippy with me about my false start.
Thank you, Neal.
All right, my friends, that wraps up our conversation today. Until next time, communicate with intention and lead with purpose. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again soon on The Communicative Leader.